Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell Mendes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So we're back to the two-in-one volume, The Wings of Pegasus, and eventually I will have to take the third one out of the library. I don't think I own the third one. I think I only ever took it out of the library. I might have owned it at one point. I have dim memories of that third book. So here we are, returned to the Talent series, and we are now in the second book, and that is Pegasus in Flight. Now, Pegasus in Flight is a very, very clear follow-up on To Ride Pegasus. We have one character who continues through from the first book into the second, and that is Dorothea Horvath. But to get an idea of how far this is, Dorothea in the first book is born and a toddler by the end of the first book. In this sequel, Dorothea is now a woman in her 70s, 80s. She's a little old lady with a will of steel. And the two lead characters, Sasha Rosnin and, or two of the leads, Sasha Rosnin and Risa Owen, they're both the children, grandchildren of David Owen and Amalda Vaden and Vsevlod Rosnin from the first book. And basically the first book was very much about establishing talent. It was about saying, here's what happens when people first get definitive scientific proof that telepathy and telekinesis are real. Here's the establishment of a society. Here's how they fit themselves into a modern society and how they would make that work and how they would make that legal and official. This is basically, we're now 2 generations down the road. We're now at the point where everybody accepts that talent is a real thing, that it's established, that it's definite, that they have a place in society, that they are not merely accepted, they are considered essential. But now we're in a position where effectively this is where things get really, this is sort of the precursor to where things get really, really sci-fi. In this book, you see, humanity has discovered inhabitable planets and has apparently developed the technology to be able to get people out to those planets within something like a rational amount of time. That people getting out to those planets are no longer going to be going out there in, the sci-fi theory of the generational ship. That is, because the sci-fi theory of the generational ship is the idea that you get on this ship and people are just going to live whole lives on the ship. They're going to be born, live, and die, and have children, and the whole 9 yards, and eventually they will get to another planet. The theory behind generational ships in sci-fi is usually that, the Earth is no longer inhabitable, or people can no longer stay where they are, and it's just absolutely necessary, and so, you've loaded everybody on. But in this case, one of the 2 central lines in this book is that there is a space station being built, which will be the launching off point for expeditions of settlers to other planets. And one of the key things in that is the idea of having talent, that is mostly telekinetics, up there on the space station, because of course, not only is it more efficient to have a telekinetic move certain objects in outer space, but It's a great deal less risky because, of course, a telekinetic can just reach out with their brain and they don't have to go out into outer space. They don't have to put on a spacesuit. They don't have to do spacewalks. They can just use their brains to push stuff around. So it saves a lot on effort, on time, on all of those things that it would back on planet Earth, but also reduces risk and so on and so forth. But the person who's running the station, who's building the station, who is in charge of building it, has effectively decided that she does not believe that talent requires, that these psychics require specially shielded quarters, that that the amount of effort that they're putting in is less than everybody else, because she is described in the book as basically being the kind of person who has decided that, well, if they're moving it with their brains, clearly they can't be using any energy, which, of course, the book makes it very, very clear that yes, they are burning energy, that it takes as much energy to use your brain to move stuff as it does to pick it up and carry it somewhere. But also, she does not accept that just because there is no auditory sound in space doesn't mean that people can't hear all of the psychic clangor going on around them. You know, if you're a telepath, you can hear everybody thinking around you. Well, if you're up there on a space station with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of other people, you can hear all of them thinking and shouting in your metaphorical ear all the time, and specially shielded quarters so that you can actually sleep would make sense. But she has basically refused to accept that. So what you have is you have that going on one end, with her trying to basically using legal loopholes related to the fact that she is using old Soviet laws, because this was written, this is sort of a book from a time when the Soviet Union remained very much something hovering over basically everybody. You know, Anne McCaffrey had much of her life under, you know, under the threat of the Cold War, and the Berlin Wall, after all, didn't come down until the 90s, and this is a book that was published in 1990. The particular edition that I have was only published in 91. So, you know, Soviet strictures and problems remained a thing, and actually they do remain a thing to this day, because seriously, a former KGB agent is running Russia, but whatever. Not the point. Anyway, so they're backed into it. In the meantime, you have Peter Reidinger the First, and the reason I say the first is because Peter Reidinger, the later editions, appear in the Rowan and those other books further along. And he is the first talent to figure out how to use an electrical generator to boost his telekinetic abilities. His Gestalt capability is just a brand new discovery in this book, and it's something that it allows him to do stuff that no other kinetics can, precisely because he can amplify his power. And so there's a large portion of this book that focuses on just the issues of Peter, because Peter is found because his talent got sort of brought to the forefront because he is a quadriplegic. A wall fell on him and he's in a hospital, and it turns out that his telekinesis as such is such that it allows him to effectively counterfeit at being normal. So there's that. The other main line in this is that this is a somewhat dystopian society. There's a hint of dystopia underlying this, because the population has gotten so big so very enormous that literally all over the earth they have basically forced zero population growth laws into place. If a family has 2 children, then the parents, if you go into the hospital to have your second child, you will have your tubes tied. They will not allow you to have any more children because zero population growth is having to be very, very stringently enforced. However, there are a lot of people who feel that they shouldn't be stopped from having children, and so they have their children on the sly. They have illegal children. And this creates a very, very large market for the sale of children to people who want them for slave labor or for other much grimmer purposes. And Turla, who is given the rather creative surname of Tunel, which is particularly creative because she is not remotely from any ethnic background that would have that as a surname, is the other main child star of this book. She's about 12 years old. She has a talent that allows her to translate any language instantly by basically finding her way into everybody's language centers and just can hear whatever it is that they're saying and or thinking and translate directly into their language. But she's an illegal. And her part in this book opens with her helping families in the in the low class end of town on the wrong side of the track, families with women who insist on having a lot of children, but who also basically promptly at the age of 10 will sell those same children into slavery as a matter of survival. And it's a bit of it's a slightly problematically described issue, because it's fairly clear that Anne McCaffrey doesn't really have much sympathy for people who are going to have that many children in their lives for no other reason than that their religious or cultural background says they should. But there's a lot in there that has to do with people who are not given the education to understand exactly why they shouldn't be having that many children, who don't have that opportunity, and the fact that that sort of education never reaches the people who need it the most. So Turla is from there, and she and Peter wind up by the end of the book being kidnapped. They blow wide open a child slavery ring. But this is, unlike the last book, is a novel. The last book was 4 novellas strung together that follow a chronological progression, talking about approximately the same people in approximately the same location. This is a novel in which we have several people who have 2 major plot threads going on that, dovetail and fit quite neatly together. And it is very nice how a whole bunch of disparate threads that don't seem at first to really do connect together in the end. It's very nice that this ties itself all together very well. It's not that there isn't a place for books where things don't necessarily tie together well, but I do like the fact that Rahissa's problem, however you're supposed to pronounce that name, I don't know. I don't know Welsh names. I don't deal in Welsh. That Rissa Owen's dislike of the Malaysian prince is just borne out so spectacularly by the end of the book in a way that ties him nicely into, it ties everything nicely together. So, I think that's all that I have to say about this. And I will move on to the third book in this series. But before that, I will see you all next week.